All right, welcome everybody to today's meeting. I got a message from Todd just a little bit ago that he's waylaid by travel and won't be able to chair this meeting. And so I see Roger is online, and I was hoping you could step in as the chair pro tem.
Unfortunately, I've got to leave early, so I would see if you could find somebody else.
All righty. Well, do we have any volunteers to run the meeting as chair today? I guess let's take a roll call first and then we'll deliberate on the chair and we'll see if we have a quorum. Yeah. So Todd Bayerther's out. Roger Haringa, you're here. Joe Mayo, I'm not seeing in the room. Che Fortaleza,
Present.
thank you. Tim Woodard,
Here.
Steve Belzak, not seeing online. Lance Dahl,
Here.
thank you. Hoyt Jeter, not seeing online. Todd Sullivan, or sorry, Sean Carlstrom,
I'm here.
thank you. Todd Sullivan, not seeing online. Bill Mybush, I'm not seeing online. Brian Horseman, not seeing online. Josh Mergens,
Here.
thank you. Trent Tenney, not seeing online. Michael Shaw,
Here.
thank you. Brett Conway, not seeing online. Michael Barth,
I'm here.
thank you. Leah Summer, not seeing online. Paul Clark,
Here.
thank you. Andy Leonto, thank you. All right, with that, we do have a quorum, and I see Joe Mayo just popped on.
Present. Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. So we have a quorum sitting here today. Our chair and vice chair are indisposed and won't be able to run the meeting. So I'm looking for a chair pro tem as our first order of business today.
I can help you with that, Dustin. Lance
All
Dahl.
right. And I'm having some issues with my notes-taking device. Give me 2 moments here to get. All right, can we have a motion to appoint Lance Dahl as the chair pro tem for this meeting?
So move. This is Tim.
Second.
That's Andy. All righty, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any in opposition?
I abstain, Dustin.
Gotcha, thank you. With that one, Lance, you are the meeting chair for the moment, and then at the end of this meeting, you will revert back to just a normal member. And so we're here with the welcoming and introductions, and typically we will invite the members of the public to identify themselves if they wish.
Do we have anybody here from the public that would like to step up and introduce themselves for the meeting today?
Yes, I would. Hi, David Neiman. I'm a multifamily architect in Seattle, and I have a proposal around dwelling unit size before you.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Patrick.
Yes, thank you. This is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington.
I don't
All
see
right.
any more hands, Dustin.
No, sir, not seeing any on my end.
All right. Item 3, review and approve the minutes.
We're on agenda actually for this part.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
This is Tim. I'd make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Dustin, sorry. The RCW that's noted on here is not the correct one. Should be 1927-801. Or 042 is temporary shelter.
I gotcha. Thank you for pointing that one out.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Okay, would the motion makers, entertain I guess we don't have a second on that one just yet.
I'll withdraw
Josh
that
Meredith, I'll
motion.
second. I'm sorry, Tim.
I'll withdraw and make a new motion to approve the revised agenda as written.
And Josh, would you still be interested in seconding?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Mr. Lance, that's on
Yep.
to you.
Okay, do we have any discussion on that? All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Do we have any nays? Agenda is approved. Now I guess I can jump ahead to the review and approve of the minutes.
Yes, on the minutes, we didn't get those ready in time for this meeting. So those ones will be brought to the next meeting of this group, so next week.
Okay. Then we're on to item 4, dwelling unit size. Dustin, if you'd like to
Yeah.
conversation.
So we've been discussing this one, what the intent of the legislation is, and trying to identify the problem as we are deciding the tack to move with this one. So on the documents for this meeting, we have David Neiman's proposal. So David's here today to potentially introduce that. We've also got a study on the housing requirements that's provided to us by Paul Clark from the Department of Health. And then, so we've been looking at what the existing amendment or the existing language and amendments to this section of the building code are. And I think we're getting close to a point where we can say these are the items we're wanting to cover in our deliberations. We have the topic summary as posted for this meeting. And we can refine that here today. But I think the goal of this particular meeting is really going to be nailing down what the topics are that we're trying to discuss as we address making modifications to comply with the legislation passed for us. So with that, I think it would be good, or I guess, David, before we jump on to not your proposal, I wanted to make sure you're here available for the whole meeting.
Yes, is this a 1 hour meeting? Do I understand
sir.
that correctly? Yeah, I'm available for the whole hour.
Okay, awesome. I'll pause. Micah, I see your hand up.
Thanks for being recognized. I just wanted to ask if it has ever been posted anywhere that you're calling for proposals for this item. You're saying you're getting to a point where we're going to be determining which proposals are going to move forward, but I don't think there's ever been any posting or notification to the public that you're actually accepting proposals for this legislation. Thanks.
That is correct, Micah. We haven't made a posting yet. As we get through this meeting, I believe we're going to be making that call for proposals, and we'll work with the folks to get those in. So notice to the public and everybody forthcoming on what we're looking for the proposals. And so what we have before us, we got the study by Paul Clark. I kind of wanted to review that and open some discussion on that, and then talk with David Neiman on his proposal, and then hopefully we can make some mileage on this topic moving down the road. Patrick.
Yeah, on a similar note to Micah, are you planning to start Sierra 102 rulemaking documentation that you're rulemaking on these topics?
I do plan to file the CR 101. I did some filings today, and those are coming up next.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Paul Clark, do you mind if I call on you to introduce what you provided to us yesterday as a kind of discussion on what our topic is going to look like? So let me pop open your document and show it. And if it helps for you, Paul, I can let you share screen and you can try, but I can share as well.
I can share my screen. That would be fine.
Okay. Right,
Share here.
Share.
Let's see that one here. All right, perfect. Can you see that? Or yet? Oh, I gotta actually push the share button. Sorry.
I see it starting up, and yes, I see the diagram on screen now.
Yeah, so basically what I left the last meeting, with kind of wanting to understand kind of what the if based on what was asked is that we're trying to reduce what the legislature said is to try and reduce the efficiency dwelling unit. So I wanted to look and see what minimum looks like. And so that's where I said, okay, well, let's back up and put together all the components that make up a dwelling unit, and then see what it ends up. And this document is probably different. It's a little different than what I gave you last week, um, but in a general sense, it's a tiny unit. So what I did was I just did a little drawing that said, all right, what could it be based on, this is obviously not an accessible unit. This is something that, would start with the IRC and use the minimum requirements of what the efficiency dwelling unit would require. And it came up to be a really tiny unit that could meet all of the requirements. Now, just because you can draw it doesn't necessarily mean that you should build it, necessarily, because it's tiny. It's even smaller than what we historically have looked at as dwelling units in the past. I think it was 120 square feet, which from that perspective, this is smaller than that, but it is a very tiny unit, and I really drew this to kind of bring up, kind of invoke conversation, and I wouldn't look at this like uh, it's uh, it's a good design necessarily. It's just a thought that I put down on and drew it up to invoke the conversation on what tiny units could look like. Um, and obviously, so one thing that didn't really, wasn't really asked, I guess, is that, how small a unit could be. This is for, one person in this, I guess, or you could, potentially put bunk beds, I guess, where the twin bed is shown. But that would be a very tiny unit. But I guess imagine this unit with, 20 more square feet, to get to more of the traditional size that we had before of 120, instead of the 100, which is what I showed on this little plan. So I guess what I was also confused about is, in this efficiency dwelling, it talks about unit shall provide a separate closet. Does that mean separate from the space or separate from the 190 square feet that would be required, I guess, for this, the dwelling unit? So what I kind of showed was, okay, well, maybe it could be a closet or a wardrobe or something like that, that would be included in that square footage. So, but I think from a general standpoint, I don't see any reason why. I could see a reason why we could go below the 190 square feet, but go below the 120, I don't even see how it could be done, based on all the requirements. And I'm just putting on my architect's hat to kind of do this. This is not the same. We don't deal with this at the health department, so this is really just me kind of helping out the tag to really understand what minimum could look like.
I have a comment to offer on that if this is an appropriate time.
Yes, by all means, we're open conversation at this point.
Paul, I think what you're showing is there's 101 square feet of kind of open room area. That's like where the bed and the hallway and the area by the door and so forth.
Sure.
That's included in 101? I think so. This sort of gets into a little bit of an open area of code interpretation. In Seattle, how living room area is interpreted is that the only area that's included in the living room is anything that fits within a 7-foot by 7-foot square. This has not always been this way, but this is like one of the things and I don't know how this is done in other jurisdictions. So for example, the only area that would be included in the living room count in this plan would be the area where between the twin bed and the kitchen, because that's the only kind of square area of 7-foot dimension. I mean, possibly none of it actually, because some of it's only 6 foot 6 inches wide. But so this kind of gets into not only like how big is your living room, but what counts as your living room, and that it is a kind of a crucial part in sort of both either writing the code or interpreting the code, because it can lead to very, very different outcomes. So yeah, you would have to comply with how Seattle would look at that. You would have to take the area where the bed is and grow that area to 190 square feet from its current something like 60 or 70.
Okay. Well, like I say, I at the health department, we don't deal with housing like, most jurisdictions deal with it. I just was trying to put together and try to interpret, I guess, what this actually meant. So that part, I guess, that I think this should be a good discussion based on, I think your proposal, I saw that, it crossed out these numbers, to be, 70 square feet.
Correct.
And so, really what it really comes down to is, I think that it would be just best to really include what the dwelling unit should include, and maybe a clear definition of what that really means, and to get to that minimum size, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's crucial in understanding what you're approving. You may need to close the gap between the code language on what habitable space means and the Chapter 12 standard.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll stop sharing, I guess, and maybe we can just have a discussion. How do I do that?
I'll take over the share. I'm pulling up the
Okay,
agenda.
perfect.
So, any comments? And so in addition for Paul Clark, if there's I don't see any hands coming up. My question, or I guess, Tim, I'll pause for you.
Feel free to go first if you'd rather, but
I was kind of leading away from Paul's stuff, so I'll
yeah,
let you go.
So what I was looking at when you were discussing which area would count towards the living area, traditionally what we got is room dimensions, and it wouldn't incorporate things like the bed. So your room dimensions, that's 7 foot by 7 foot is what I heard you mention. Traditionally, that's your room area. We don't dictate what your bed size is. So that's your room area. So that would count all towards your square footage. So seeing your proposal has a 70 square feet is very concerning, to say the least. Because then, I mean, it would be fine if we're going to actually dictate where the beds and furniture and things like that are, then maybe I could see getting to there more. But yeah, that was just some comments of looking at those two examples. And I think the way Paul had it drawn up is more in line with how we traditionally enforce room sizes, which is just the walls, and not including the furniture. So yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I was going to say that unit looks very similar to the graphic on the director's rule from Seattle that we saw last time we were discussing this one. And then, so I guess where you kind of were leading there as well, Tim. So David, would like to hear how you get to the 70 square feet, and I guess let's talk about your proposal a little bit.
Sure. You want me to just walk you through the proposal, and
Yeah,
I think
I'll
I think
share it
along
on
the way I can touch on those.
Yeah, I'll share on the screen. So pretty much we got the proposed code language changes, leaving 12081 and 12082 alone. And this is the proposal here. So I'll let you take it away.
Okay. All right. Well, just 1 minute about me and what I do. So I'm one of the partners at Neiman Tabor Architects. We are specialists in multifamily housing, and we have, over the last 15 years, we've done a lot of work in small unit housing, both sort of the small efficiency dwelling unit type and congregate housing. We designed about 20 apartment projects of this type, about 1,000 total units, and as well as the ones we designed, we own and operate 3 of these buildings. So this is a type of housing that we know really well. We feel we really understand how it works and how to do it well. And we're very serious about trying to create small, affordable homes that are well designed and livable. And what we continually run up against as we do our work is this problem of sort of mandatory living room size. And as we try to solve and make units that are both small so that they can be inexpensive, and also make them well designed so that they can be livable, we consistently run up against this problem that the minimum living room size has a tendency to crowd out the more beneficial features that we're trying to get into the building. From here, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what these standards are. So there is a minimum living room size in the code, and one thing to understand is it's essentially an arbitrary standard. It's not based in public health. It's not based in science. It's based in a tradition and a history that has sort of come along. When building codes were established, look at the Uniform Building Code, started in 1927, didn't have a minimum living room size. The first standard showed up in 1946, and it was 80 square feet. In the 1965 version, it was changed to 90 square feet. And then suddenly in 1973, we got a 220 square foot living room size. I have researched this extensively. I've tried to find a linkage as to where did this come from. And the only thing I can come to is it very much correlates with kind of the politics of the day, which is at the time, cities were largely in decline, and this is reflecting the urban politics of the time when cities were losing their population and their tax base, and they're struggling with crime and livability. And they turned to policies that were aimed at getting rid of small, low-cost housing where poor people lived, and that the Uniform Building Code responded in kind. I think that is a reasonable reading of the history, but that if we instead kind of look to an objective standard, which is the National Healthy Housing Standard, this is an evidence-based, public health-based document, and they recommend 70 square feet as a minimum room size for a unit. But they also recommend a series of other things that are in addition to the code, that are based upon livability and storage and cleanability and sanitation. And that's essentially what I've based my proposal on. I've kind of ignored what I'm describing as essentially arbitrary living room size standards that are in the code, and have replaced them with the recommendations of the National Healthy Housing Standard, which are starting with 70 square feet, and then looking at a series of features that will make for a kitchen that is more cleanable, and a bathroom that is more cleanable, and storage that will allow you to use these spaces better, and so forth. I want to, Dustin, I would kind of like to show some plans. And is it okay to steal the screen from you?
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, let me share my screen over here, and then let's see if I can grab. Are you all looking at a web page that shows some plans?
Yep. Yes, sir. We've got the orange room in there.
Yeah. Great. So this is from an article I wrote that was basically sort of to help out the discussion around HB 2071. It has the rather cheeky title of microhousing. It's not about the size, but how you use it. We'll ignore the copy editor there. But it's a serious article looking at essentially unit size and how small units are designed and how do we do it well, and sort of like what's the baseline today and what happens as we start to reduce living room size. What else can we get into units, and is that better or worse? So this is a drawing of a code compliant studio today. So this is looking at 190 square foot living room size. Like this is using the Seattle standards that you count the living room where all dimensions are 7 feet or greater, and you ignore kind of the neck areas like what's in here, which don't have 7 foot dimensions. This is not, as far as I know, not a universal standard, but I work in Seattle, and this is the important thing for me is to get my projects approved in Seattle. So, so just looking at that, like this is a roughly 300 square foot studio apartment is what you can do sort of at a minimum to get a 190 square foot living room, get a bathroom that's a type B compliant, and accessible door clearances and a nominal kitchen. So if I kind of take the same sized unit, and then I start to say, well, what else can I have besides a living room? Because living room is just an empty space for furnishing. But what if I want to build in a desk and build in a bookshelf and create more closet and make a bigger kitchen so my kitchen's more usable? Now I've got the same sized unit. I have 140 square feet of living room. Right, so I have a smaller living room, but man, do I have a lot more stuff in there that I can use. I've increased my livability while taking away living room size. And this is the problem that we get into, is that when we are designing small units, but we have a minimum living room size that is larger than we need, what it does is it crowds out all these other things. We end up with kitchens that are too small to be usable. We don't have the kind of storage that people need. And Seattle has a bunch of CEDU rules about storage, but they're so prescriptive and arbitrary, but that they don't allow us to. They require us to provide like a 3x3 storage area instead of bookshelves, which people might appreciate. So what the point I'm getting at is that as we take away the strict prescriptive requirement for the living room size, it opens up the possibility of designing things that are much more useful and much more important for livability. This is like, anyways, I think this is, if you look at this website, you can kind of use this slider to sort of pull back and forth and look at those two options. There's some other plans in here that are sort of getting at small efficiency dwelling units. So like this is, I think certainly you guys are going to be looking at Seattle's CEDU standards as a possible basis for what you're doing. So this is something that's built to like current Seattle CEDU standards, which is 120 square foot living room plus at least 30 square feet in the neck, which is almost unavoidable. So again, there's very prescriptive requirements on what we can do for our storage areas. In this case, they require at least 2 feet of depth in the storage, and anything that's less doesn't count. And as we kind of get into different solutions, and now I'm reducing my living room size, but I'm increasing my kitchen, and I'm creating a washer dryer, and I'm providing different kinds of storage other than essentially just a deep closet. And then as the unit gets smaller, and I'm now down to a 70 square foot living room, but I've got built-in bookshelves, and I've got again a more usable kitchen than I had in my previous version, and I've got an in-unit washer dryer. That you can build a very, very small unit in terms of the living room and still build in a lot of features that are quite handy and useful for folks. So and then as you get into if you go to the end, there's like three-dimensional representation you can see of all the different unit types that I just described, and you can kind of see they're all valid housing. Like none of these are below a standard that we should be regulating and say no one is allowed to build this and no one is allowed to live here. These are things that are clearly livable, and I don't know what kind of life experiences you folks have had, but they're a lot nicer than a lot of places that I've lived in many of the years I've been on this planet. So our goal is to try to both simplify the problem of building small housing for designers, but also to bring the standard in line with the National Healthy Housing Standard, which is science-based, evidence-based, defensible, and in many cases, it will make the units smaller, but it will add features which are defensible in terms of providing people with units that have better storage, better cleanability, and more usability. I'm going to stop sharing that element, and Dustin, I can either, if you want to pick back up the proposal. So let's go back to, the proposal talks a little bit about construction cost. So there's if like you go to, I don't know, two or three pages in, we get to some tables that get to the construction cost. I just want to explain kind of where these numbers come from. So we took construction cost data from a company called STS Construction. They're folks that we've worked with on a number of our projects. They just happened to have a project called Keystone Apartments they were working on that was kind of about the right size and felt appropriate. And they had cost data that was very current for it. So I used the schedule of values from that project and sort of broke it down to talk about to answer some of the questions.
Can I interrupt a second before
Sure.
we get into the cost data? Can we talk about your article and some of the sizes you just went over?
Oh, sure.
And information for Seattle. We're getting a whole lot of information, and I want to provide some background. And David, this is Micah Chappelle,
Oh, hi,
Seattle
Micah.
Department of Construction Inspections.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, we can kind of go back to your models there and discuss some of those. I know some of those are based on the CDU item.
Yeah.
I do want to give some background as well. When you're talking about living room is the specified term that was only incorporated in the efficiency dwelling unit. Habitable space is a different term that is defined, and so is dwelling unit. So I want to clarify that the dwelling unit is required to be 190 square feet. The previous language was one room of 120 square feet plus another room of 70 square feet would equal the 190. The current efficiency dwelling unit size is 190. In other words, it would be equivalent to the dwelling unit size. So again, we're conflating some terms. You talked about living room. And living room is technically not a defined term. I think that actually got removed. Possibly, I'd have to go back and check the language.
Okay.
But again, we have habitable space, which could be a living room, could be a bedroom, could be a kitchen. And that's the sizes that are determined. According to the National Healthy Housing Standard that you're discussing as well, that only refers to habitable space being 70 square feet. So I just want to throw in there that I think this group needs to determine if one habitable room of 70 square feet is acceptable, or are we going to define a dwelling unit to be one habitable space, which it would be as an efficiency dwelling unit. But again, that will be equal to that 190 square feet. So a lot of terms being thrown out there in a lot of different sizes. I do want to say that the CDU rule that you mentioned with Seattle and why things are very prescriptive is because technically those don't meet the 190 square feet, but with the added required storage of certain sizes and added other requirements, that was reviewed as an equivalent to the state requirement of a dwelling unit or an efficiency dwelling unit being 190 square feet. In other words, we're still providing you that minimum habitable square footage, but we're picking up storage and other things as a prescriptive requirement. So yes, they are very prescriptive. And David, there's a reason for that, and I'm sure you're aware of it. You were heavily involved in that director's rule, is that we have state laws that we have to meet that limit us on what we can and can't do. So there is a reason those are prescriptive, folks. And I know you know the history, I know the history, but a lot of folks on here don't know the history. So I appreciate you letting me take that time to kind of jump in there and throw a little more history on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
And I'm all for this stuff going smaller. So we're on the same page. I'm just not sure if I'm there to the 70 square feet yet, but
understood. Understood.
So I think
in the plan that I'm showing, I think the 190 versus 120 versus 70, what we're describing is the area that's shown in orange on the plan. Like this is what's being regulated. And then in addition to that, you need to have a door to get into your unit, and you need to have accessible clearances, and you need to have a food preparation area, and you need to have a bathroom, and you need to have a closet. So all those things are in addition to the habitable room or the living room that we are describing. So just in terms of when we're talking about square footages, 70 is not how big your unit is. 120 is not how big your unit is. 190 is not how big your unit is. It's how big the open area is. Is that, Micah, is that a fair description?
Yeah, I think the 190, in my opinion, is your actual habitable space. And then Seattle, of course, throws out the occupiable space because we lower that, but we kind of align with the kitchen space being allowed to be less than 70 square feet already in the model code. So yeah, I think we're about on the same page, David. Thanks for the questions, and let me jump in. Appreciate it.
Okay, great. Here, let's see if I can probably just pop back to the change proposal here. Is that okay, Dustin, if I just
Works for me, yes, no problem.
hop into it here? Okay. All right, so we talked about the minimum room sizes, and then we talked about the essentially substitution also in the addition of some language from the National Healthy Housing Standard to create these additional requirements for usability and sanitation. We talked about sort of what I'm describing as the arbitrary historical nature of these numbers. And then I want to talk about costs. So this table that is in the proposal, this is based on data we got from STS Construction for a workforce housing project in Seattle called Keystone Apartments. Not one of our projects, but similar to a lot of the things that we've designed. And we chose it because it was a low-rise wood building, and it was recently constructed. So it had really good cost data. It was just finishing up. So we took the schedule of values from the cost breakdown, and we basically broke the schedule of values into trades that reasonably scale by square footage. So imagine like framing and drywall and so forth. It's like, those are going to get evenly distributed across the square footage of the building, more or less regardless of unit count. And then we also looked at different trades like mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or countertops and cabinets that basically scale by the numbers of units that you have. And we took those costs and we broke them, we put them into either these things mostly scale by unit or these things mostly scale by square foot. And then we did that to come up with a formula. And the formula was essentially this project broke down into $257 per square foot plus $60,000 per unit. And we used that idea to say, well, okay, if I took the same size building and I doubled the unit count, what would it do to the cost, the overall cost? And then what would it do to the cost per unit? So the project that we were studying, the Keystone Apartments, this is like its actual numbers. Actual unit size was average of about 386, and it costs about $207,000 per unit to build. And if you look at what units of that size rent for these days, they should be renting for about $1,600 just by the publicly available data. If you kind of take those things and sort of break them down in size and say, okay, what if I make my average unit size 1,300 square feet? What would I expect? Oh, sorry, 300 square feet. What would I expect? I would expect my cost per unit to drop to $175,000. My overall costs are going to increase. I mean, like the total cost is going to grow, but the cost per unit is going to drop. And if I compare again, like the rent data that we have based on the unit size, we would expect that the monthly rent to be about $1,300, drop about 16%. It corresponds pretty well in terms of the cost per unit and the market data that's out there for rent. Same thing as you go down, as you drop to 250 square feet. Again, our cost per unit is dropping some more. Our cost per unit percentage is roughly corresponding to the rent that's dropping there. And then if we get down to 200 square feet, which is kind of the smallest, that's if you take our 70 square foot proposal that I've put out there, that would result in units around 200 square foot minimum. That roughly corresponds to what we see in congregate housing today. And that would correspond to a monthly rent of a little over $1,000. It's about a 35% rent decrease off of what we see in sort of new construction workforce housing today. And again, it's a cost to to the builder also of a drop of about around a third. And that corresponds to about $68,000 per dwelling unit in cost savings. It happens to correspond to about $100 a square foot of additional cost, right? But a cost per unit is significantly reduced. Anyway, I think that's more or less that's what I wanted to cover. I guess just to kind of show you here, just to oh no, it's not there. It is here. I want to just show the rent data that this is based on. So this is like our rent data comes from this let me zoom out here a little bit. This is a microhousing study that's put out every year by Simon Anderson. So they've been collecting this data for year over year, and they have rent data for both. This is conventional studios, for CDUs, and for congregate housing. And so that's like the rent numbers that I am showing are based off of this study. That is, I believe, linked in the proposal, or I sent it in with the proposal. I sent in. Anyways, bottom line, if what I'm proposing, new construction conventionally under IBC, if you build small workforce housing units, those are going to rent for about $1,600 a month. If you build CDUs according to Seattle's current standard, those will rent for about $1,340 a month. And if you build 200 square foot studios, as I am proposing, we would expect those to rent for about $1,040, so a little over $1,000 a month. That is, like, based on today's area median income, that is affordable to someone making minimum wage in Seattle. So owners get to build more units on their land. Renters get to live in walkable, desirable neighborhoods that would otherwise be out of reach. More people get to live closer to transit, shops, and services. That's better for businesses and supports public infrastructure investments. And it takes less energy to heat and cool a small unit, so you're using less materials, less embodied carbon. And building small is one of the best climate strategies that we have. That is my proposal in a nutshell. And I'll stop talking at you and take any questions that you got.
Dustin, do you mind going back up to the actual code change proposal portion of that?
Yeah, not a problem. Does the size and location on the screen work for everybody? I can definitely make her bigger.
This works.
Okay.
So my concern is kind of what we touched on before, where it's 1208.3 dwelling unit size. So that modified to 70 square feet would imply what you call the neck area, bathroom, everything would all only be allowed to be, or could be allowed to go down to 70 square feet, because your dwelling unit is all of that combined. So even if we got on board with your proposal, it should be, we've got to figure out what the number for the dwelling unit size is, because that's what the legislative intent says we have to reduce. We have to reduce that number from 190. That's really the extent of what the legislative proposals tell us we have to do. And then, then we could get into the discussion on your design for the room area size requirements, and then kind of define from there. But I definitely wouldn't be in support of dropping that down to 70 square feet. That would end up being closer to your, like you keep mentioning 200 square feet, but we have to go less than 190. I think Seattle's right now is for the entire dwelling unit, it could be 150. And then it's, Micah, help me if I'm going off track here, but then it's something to the effect of 120 and 30 square feet. So 120 for the main room area, and then 30 square feet, that gets you to the 150 on that. So anyway, just defining these terms, and we talked about kind of getting them intermixed together, I think is really important for our directive here. I think a lot of our discussion should focus around the room area and whether or not we're going to get on board with kind of what you're proposing, or look at other proposals, and then maybe utilize that to kind of help us get that number below 190 from the 1208.3, but definitely not all the way down to 70 square feet.
I think the 1208.3 is referring to the living room, not not the entire dwelling unit. I mean, it's like it's returning to the habitable space of the dwelling unit, and what counts as habitable space is open to interpretation. The most liberal interpretation of it is that it says that habitable space. It's also in chapter 12. Habitable space has to be a minimum of 7 foot in all dimensions. Like that's the language that's in the IBC. That can be the most liberal interpretation of that is if you can put a 7-foot circle inside your living room, then it's all good. And the most conservative one that I know of is Seattle's, which is that you need to have a 7-foot rectangle, a 7-foot square on it, and that has to be able to fit. Only the areas where that 7-foot square can fit are counted towards your habitable area. So I think, I mean, that's the assumption I've based my proposal on, is that a more conservative interpretation would be used. When I say a 70 square foot habitable space results in a 200 square foot unit, that's the assumption I'm based it on, that the neck of space that's there by the kitchen and by the unit entry wouldn't count.
So again, I mean, I don't know if Josh wants to go first. It's just, if you want to refer to the definitions to kind of get clarity on what we're talking about. If you look at dwelling unit definition, it's going to be a single unit providing for complete independent living facilities for one person, including the provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. So it would the dwelling unit size would include all of those other areas, including your closets, including your bathrooms, including your kitchen. Just that's currently how dwelling unit is defined within the code.
Agreed.
Okay.
But I guess what 1208.3 is saying is that within that dwelling unit, you need to have currently 190 square feet of habitable space, and the habitable space is not your bathroom, is not your kitchen, and then it's open to interpretation whether or not it's the smaller areas within the space.
Josh?
Yeah, so habitable space actually is defined in IBC chapter 2. It says a space in a building for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. So it would seem that a kitchen is certainly included in habitable space. I like what you're saying, David. I think we just need to work on language. But to both the points, it does say habitable space. It does include eating and cooking. It does also expressly exclude bathrooms, toilet rooms, closet, halls, storage, or utility spaces in similar areas not considered habitable spaces.
Yeah.
So kitchen is certainly included. Bathrooms are explicitly excluded. And I don't even know that there's a whole lot of interpretation. I think it's pretty well defined in the code.
Yeah, agreed. By kitchen, I meant the bar of countertop, but
Got it. Okay. And that gets a little weird because it says storage or utility spaces. And I guess that's where some of the interpretation comes in. And maybe one of the calls of what we're doing right now is we need to bracket those interpretations as we're pushing these dwelling unit sizes smaller and smaller. I think we can achieve the same goal that you have, David, which seems like a good layout that makes sense and is, consistent with the National Healthy Housing Standard. We just need to work on language to better define and expand the definitions of habitable space, dwelling unit, to make sure that people are interpreting that correctly and we don't have architects arguing with building departments over interpretation.
agreed.
I thought I saw Micah's hand up, but Micah, do you have anything on that one?
No, I'm good. Thanks, Justin.
All right, cool. So I guess at this point we're no more questions for David. And I guess we'll look towards our topic summary to try to nail stuff down. I've been trying to keep up with it, but here in the last stuff, we would like to maybe run some updates to the definition of habitable space and dwelling unit. Is that inaccurate? Okay. And then I guess I'll pull this up for everybody to see what I've been working on. Yeah, sorry, I'm pressing many buttons. All right, so this one's been running for a while. Just trying to populate what we're trying to cover here. So, we reviewed the existing state amendment. That doesn't meet our current legislation requirements. Today we went over David's proposal. As a comment there, it's got 70 square feet habitable space plus some additional features. Is that a accurate kind of summary just for some comments there, David?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right.
One thing that we haven't talked again about today is accessibility for these units. And I think that that's something that is probably going to be required for the, groups of these units. But I'll pause there. I see some hands. I got Josh first.
Yeah, and maybe I should let Tim go first. I was just going to present to this conversation. I took the National Healthy Housing Standard table of contents and kind of pared this down to what seems most applicable. I was really pointing towards that because the House bill specifically says we should be looking towards this document and amending the code for applicable sections. So I was interested today in presenting what I think are the sections we want to narrow it down to kind of narrow our focus, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
I think we could definitely leap off on that one here a bit, but Tim, go ahead.
Just because of the legislation that does say we need to reduce dwelling unit size down. The legislation doesn't say, as far as I remember, and maybe it's worth pulling up, but doesn't say reduce habitable space down. And as it was pointed out, what I was referring to was, it does specify habitable space within dwelling unit. So just legislative intent. What is the real intent? Is it to reduce the habitable space down? I would hope so, if that's the way we're looking at it.
So would it help if I pull up the statute there, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, wrong sentence. This is so I'd say that, earlier conversation, the 190 is the number we need to target for a specific, reduction in size. And then I would say that habitable space is the areas that we can target for that. We have some minimum bathroom dimensions, minimum kitchen kind of dimensions, and so
It's the only variable.
Yeah.
yeah. So would it be, as far as our topic summary here, I have it in as minimum habitable space, but should we characterize that a little bit different? Okay.
Not if we're agreeing that that's the only variable we're discussing.
Okay. And we talked about dwelling unit type definitions briefly. Now that I'm revisiting this, the note isn't making a lot of sense to me. We're not gonna have different versions of a efficiency dwelling unit. So is this line relevant to our discussion?
I don't think so. Just
Okay.
to throw one up.
I'm gonna remove it. How many rooms needed, reference standards being applicable. So I think just reviewing what we have here, this is the items we want to address when we're looking for proposals from the public. And then Josh, I think now is the appropriate time to jump off on that table of contents, and maybe we can round out this list of stuff for folks to be considering when they're looking at making amendments. And Micah,
Great.
you have your hand up?
Thanks, Dustin. One last item. I do think we need to identify the relevant difference between this smaller dwelling unit size and sleeping units. Because those, if we're getting down to a 70 square foot dwelling unit or habitable space for a dwelling unit, what's a sleeping unit look like at this point? And then what would be the actual difference then? I mean, we'll be maintain the difference in the definition, but size-wise, it's ridiculously small at this point for considering a sleeping unit. And maybe that's not relevant, but I think folks should be aware of that item in the code. Thanks.
Thank you, Micah. All right, Josh or Lance, go ahead.
Yeah, Dustin, we're down to 5 minutes. I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yeah, I was hoping we could, if nothing else, Josh, if you can send what you're preparing to share, we can just distribute it out and make it available.
That's perfectly fine. It was just to show up with some kind of jumping off point after doing some reading on some of this. I think we've got some other really good jumping off points. I have no problem just sending that after. I don't want to take too much time.
Okay. Well, then I'll expect to get that and I'll send that out to the group and post it on our documents page and have it ready for the next meeting. And I think that kind of winds us down. So for what you can expect, we'll be filing CR 101 on the 4 legislative building amendment topics we've been working on. So that's the single exit topic, the the multiplex housing topic, the dwelling unit size topic, and then the emergency temporary shelters standards topic. So we'll get 4 CR1s in place on those. I'll be doing some noticing on that, and then with the notices that are going out via Gov Delivery, I'll be including this topic summary and calling for proposals from the public. Since this isn't, our normal code rulemaking cycle, there won't be a close on the end or on the tail of the proposal period. So once we start getting proposals in, I want to start bringing them to the group to discuss. And as we discuss, we can further refine based on proposals that we may receive moving out. But I'll open it up and say we're looking for like a 2-week period, maybe longer. If anybody has suggestions on what a minimum time frame would be to just advertise, I'd be open to that. But I think we're trying to get this moving probably by the next meeting. So a 2-week window works from now. All right. So that being the plan, I'll turn this back over to Lance and we can round out the meeting. I'll get the agenda pulled back up. Oops. There we are. So, and I don't have any other business for the folks.
All right, no other business. Does anybody else have any other business? All right, I guess we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Tim.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you everybody for your time today and be on the lookout for some of those documents coming out.
All right, thanks
you all.
everybody.